A while back, I made a video called Vlogmas 6 where I asked you to pick your favorite Christmas movies from a list that I had. And today, we're going to have a little chat about those. Now, I did not get a lot of answers on Instagram, TikTok, or YouTube, but I got enough for me to be able to include them on this video for different reasons. So, some of the basics. I love Christmas movies, even though I'm not a big Christmas fan, if that makes sense. But when you see what I picked as some of my favorites, you'll understand. It is about my sense of humor. I realize that. So, without any further ado, before I start telling you all about the movies that we selected for this list, I'm going to show you the list of movies that I had picked for you guys. Now, the first comment that I'm going to read you says, all my favorites. And even though I begged this person to actually give me some hint of which one was their favorite out of all of them, they refuse. So, just a little reminder, I'm going to give you a very sped up version of that video so that you have it in your head which ones were the movies that I asked you to pick from. Check it out. In case you haven't seen it, the reason why you had a screenshot of the generations is because I asked for your favorite movie and also what generation you were in, because I was trying to prove a theory. It kind of sort of proved it, even though we don't have a lot of comments. So check this out. These are the first comments I received on the actual video. The first one was from Lily, and it says, number 1, Edward Scissorhands, 2, The Nightmare Before Christmas, 3, Home Alone, and I'm a Millennial. Then came Molly and said, next time read the list, please. And before you all come for her, it was a logical request because not hearing, what do you call this? Impairment of vision impaired, Jesus Christ, is an issue that some of my people have, and I should have read the list. But I'm just going to say what mine are. If they're not in the video, sorry. The Ref, I watch it every year. Die Hard, Gremlins, The Last Holiday, Love Actually, The Original Grinch, and Olive, The Other Reindeer. I'm part of the forgotten generation, although I have qualms about those generational definitions. Not with you, but whoever came up with them. They don't make sense. I have something to say at the end of the video about that. The other ones that I am going to read, now keep in mind that I might not read all of them because they are on, well, you'll see. But one of the last ones that I checked was from Mink, and she said, wonderful life, Generation X, but heavily influenced by spending half my childhood with grandparents. Second favorite is Gremlin. And of course, Lily also said that one of her favorites was Edward Scissorhands. But we already knew that. So let's take a look at, I divided this in 5 categories for you guys. Now, obviously, I was not going to keep all of the movies, so that might, you'll see what happens. But I think the list that I made kind of sort of represents all of the different tastes. So let me know if you like this list and if you agree with my choices, or if you have one choice that is not on the list that you think is better than any of these. So we begin to the Are They Really Christmas Movies? Now, obviously, the first one on this category, it's a movie that needs no introduction. That would be Die Hard with Bruce Willis and Alan Rickman. It was selected by Witchy Mail as her favorite. And let's keep in mind there's a long standing debate whether or not this movie is a Christmas movie or not. It is a Christmas movie because at the end of the day, the situation happened on Christmas. And that is something that is the major part of this particular category. The movies happen around Christmas time, not necessarily were Christmas movies for some people, but for other of us are. The second choice is Trading Places, one of my husband's favorite, with Dan Aykroyd and Eddie Murphy. Now, this movie, this all happened because they were giving each other Christmas gifts, and not Dan Aykroyd and Eddie Murphy. But it's a great movie. It is a very interesting, for the times that we're living in now, you could see this happening again. Well, actually, we've seen it happen again. Think GameStop. And so, yeah, it's a great movie. And of course, the last one on this category is Tim Burton's The Nightmare Before Christmas. Now, there's a lot of speculation, much like the Bruce Willis Die Hard movie. There's a lot of speculation on whether or not this is a Christmas movie. In the case of The Nightmare Before Christmas, people debate if it's a Christmas or Halloween movie. I would like to remind you that even though it starts on Halloween, after Halloween, because of course that's when Jack gets this idea, it's all about giving Christmas presents, his interpretation of Christmas. Now, I may or may not agree with the message of this movie for reasons that I'm not going to get into because it's not for this particular video. But I absolutely love this movie. This is the family favorite, and we watch it all the time, not just on Christmas. Second category, we're going to talk about animation. Now, I decided to take movies that I think represent each category, so keep that in mind. I also think you're going to notice a pattern, but more about that later. Polar Express with Tom Hanks, and Tom Hanks, and Tom Hanks. Here's the thing with this movie. This movie, the story behind the real story of this particular movie, I think it's beautiful. Some kids get selected to come and see Santa Claus at work. And this kid doesn't believe in Santa Claus. And it's all a journey for this kid. The visuals of this movie were beautiful. I don't know if they hold up or not because I haven't seen it in like a couple of years. But the last time I saw it was when the Panini started, and I still think the effects hold. It's beautiful. And it's a cute movie, and I just like it. And I know I'm in a minority in that. Then we have A Charlie Brown Christmas. Now, Charlie Brown Christmas I selected because it's a classic. Pretty much everybody and their mother has seen it. And it's just a cute movie. And I have had that Christmas tree way too many times. In fact, this year we have one of those that everybody looks at them and go, ew, and we make them beautiful. And because we make them beautiful, it is a beautiful tree. Last but not least is Dr. Seuss' How the Grinch Stole Christmas, and this is the original, the animated one. Now, I don't know if you noticed the pattern, but the last out of the selections is my favorite. And the second thing is that I don't go exactly for traditional. I apologize if that offends you. I don't care. Let's go to the third category, shall we? at our heartstrings. Miracle on 34th Street, doesn't matter which version I like both of them for different reasons. But I have to say, Miracle on 34th Street is one of those movies that reminds you that you should believe. Now, I understand that there's people that are atheists, and obviously they're not going to believe in Santa Claus. However, I think you should believe in something good that will happen for no reason whatsoever. That is how I interpret that. And that's why I like that movie. The Preacher's Wife with Whitney Houston, Denzel Washington, and Courtney B. Vance. Now, this movie is not even mentioned a lot. And it's a beautiful movie. It's very well done. It's based on an original that happened a long time ago. Unlike now when we get versions of a movie that just came out 5 years ago and they want to redo it again. This was a movie that came out, I believe it was either the 50s or the 60s. And they did a new version. And it's and of course, who doesn't like to watch Whitney? I'm sorry, but she was an amazing singer, but she was not a bad actress at all. She was absolutely excellent. And then we have Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. Steve Martin and the great late John Candy. Now, the reason why I love this movie, there's a speech in this movie where John Candy's character... Okay, let me back up. Here's the premise of this movie if you haven't seen it. These two guys are trying to get home for Christmas. And something happens. I'm not going to give you all the details. And they have to find a way to get home. That's why the movie is called Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. It is the ultimate nightmare. And these two guys don't know each other. They're completely different personality-wise. And it's an amazing movie. And it always makes me cry. And there's this speech that John Candy does in this movie that if you thought he was just a comedic actor, this was the moment when you realized, no, this guy actually has like the chops for it. Unfortunately, he passed away too early and we never got to see that. But if you watch Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, it's a little ditty that is, I like myself. If I find the video, because I found it once on YouTube, I will go ahead and cut the clip. You know how you can cut clips from other people's videos now and show them on anywhere? And I'm going to post it on the community tab because it is an absolutely excellent speech. I do have it saved on my computer, but of course I don't want to get hit because I'm stealing, quote unquote, which I'm not, because if it's for critique or for, reinterpretation, it should be allowed. But just to avoid that, if I find it, I'll put it in the community post for you guys. Now, we go to family disasters. Now, keep in mind that some of these movies could follow in more than one category. For example, in the case of Nightmare Before Christmas, which I picked it for Is It Really a Christmas Movie, could also go for animation and pulling at your heartstrings. Planes, Trains, and Automobiles could be family disasters as well as pulling at our heartstrings. The bottom line is that they could be in several categories, but I picked the category that spoke most to me about the particular movie. We have Home Alone, which is the ultimate disaster movie with Macaulay Culkin, Joe Pesci, and Daniel Stern. And I'm sorry, I know everybody loves Macaulay Culkin's interpretation of this kid that just goes through hell. But my favorite in this movie are the crooks, Daniel Stern and Joe Pesci. I mean, when they tried to get into the house, every time something happened to them, especially Daniel Stern's high-pitched scream, every time I hear it, I'm on the floor laughing. It is what it is. this particular category, it's all right up my alley. Then we have National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation with Chevy Chase. This is a classic at this point. It is, I mean, let me explain something to you. That's not my type of movie. That's my husband's type of movie. He loves this movie. And I just want to slap him the entire movie. Not my husband, Chevy Chase. Because, oh my God, this man is an idiot. But that's the whole point. That even though, because he has the best of intentions, somehow he manages to get exactly what he wants, even if he doesn't get it the way he wants it. I guess is how I can explain it. Last but not least, in family disasters, it is by far one of my favorite movies ever, and that would be A Christmas Story. You'll poke your eye out. Now, I haven't seen the new one. I haven't seen the sequel. I don't know if I'm going to be able to watch it because the premise is that his father is no longer here. And for somebody that just lost her mother and 5 years before lost her father, I think I'm not ready for this. But I can tell you, A Christmas Story is bar none one of my favorite Christmas movies, because it is absolutely, Puerto Rico was like 10 years behind the United States in traditions and things. But I can tell you that, yeah, I could relate so much to this family. I was raised in the 70s. I was born in the 60s. And when I actually, things that I can remember are mostly from the 70s on up. And I'm telling you this, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I never had to eat duck for Christmas. But disasters around Christmas, yeah, I absolutely love it. Last but not least, I left for family classics. Now, the first one is not my family classic because I have never seen the whole thing. Sorry. But the other two are definitely family classics. The first one that we're going to talk about is Edward Scissorhands with Johnny Depp. Favorite of Linda. Now, I have seen enough of this movie to know that I'm gonna bawl my eyes out. Again, just like The Grinch and I want to say Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. The thing about Edward Scissorhands is that he is a square peg in a round hole world. It's really funny that in the case of Dr. Seuss, recently there have been accusations of racism, and some of the books have been like retired and whatnot. And it cracks me up because, number one, I'm tired of seeing people taking today's thought process and try to adapt things that happened in the past to that thought process. There is an old expression that says, when you know better, you do better. And I don't understand why we have to interpret everything by today's lens. And that's a topic for another day. However, I will say this. It's funny that they are accusing him of race issues when this movie, The Grinch, was about a person that was completely different from everybody else and how society shunned him for being different. However, it is also about somebody being different color, because he was green, duh, and how he had gone to the point where he was mad at the world because they didn't want to accept them. Now, I could say the same about The Nightmare Before Christmas, obviously about Planes and Trains and Automobiles, because I just told you about the speech about how he loved himself even though he wasn't exactly what everybody else was. In Edward Scissorhands, that is absolutely obvious because, of course, he doesn't have hands. He has scissors for hands. The other two movies, this was a toss-up, and I'm going to tell you why. Scrooge with Albert Finney, the 1960s version of Scrooge. And by the way, out of all the Scrooge movies, this is absolutely my favorite. This is a sentimental favorite of my husband's. When we got married, the first DVD that we, not DVD, I'm sorry, it was a cassette that we purchased was this. He loves this movie. And when you see the movie is very well made, and Albert Finney at the time was like really young, which is why when they do the Christmas past, they can actually show you him young because that was the actual age that he was when he did the movie. There was no such thing as the modern prosthetics, so they had to do most of it with makeup. I mean, they had some things that they could do, but it's nothing compared to what they do now with prosthetics. And when you see him old, you think that's how old he is, and that's not at all. The movie's fantastic. And he holds. Any version of Scrooge holds, but this one holds. Then we have Fred Claus, and that might be a surprising turn of events because y'all know how I prefer the classics, but the reality is that Fred Claus has become a classic in this house because of the message of this movie. And we go back to people not being what they're necessarily expected to be. I absolutely love this movie, and I don't even know what else to say. So let's talk for a second about one more thing before I let you go. Beginning of the video I mentioned generations, and if you notice, some people that left comments like Fab in Florida, Mink, Lily, and Molly left what generation they belong to. Technically there were only 2 generations mentioned, and because I know the other people, I know which generations they belong to, and it is either millennial, older millennial, or Generation X, which is my generation, which is why they make because originally what I wanted to do was separate them between categories, like who preferred in Generation X, who preferred what from the millennials, and if anybody else answered, then they would be the option for whatever. Bottom line is that we have a very small sample, but a very definite answer in terms of what we like. Now, Molly was the one who brought it up, that she had a bone to pick with this whole thing about generations. And I am not entirely sure because I haven't asked her what she means by that, but I'm hoping that she can see what I'm saying and probably agree. Here's the thing about generations. I don't think that when people were creating this whole thing about generations, they thought this through, and I'm going to tell you why. I was raised in a house with 3 baby boomers. The youngest of the baby boomers was only a baby boomer by 1 year. She was born the year before it went from baby boomer to Generation X. And her taste and her behaviors and everything that defines the Generation X is very obvious on her. However, if you look at many baby boomers that are younger, and I would like to say that depending on the generation, if a certain generation has 20 years in the span, probably the last 10 years have more similarities with the next generation, and the earlier 10 years have more similarities with the generation before them. And what I mean by that is my brothers were definitely baby boomers back in the day. I don't know what they would be like now as older, very old, because let's face it, my brother would have turned 70 this year, and the other one was not too far behind him. He was only 4 years younger. I would love to have been able to see how they would have turned out. Unfortunately, they both passed away early. What I'm trying to say is that when they were alive, they were absolutely baby boomers. There's a show called 30 something that was dedicated basically to them. And my brother, even though my brother was gay and was not happily married with someone from the opposite sex, which is basically the story of most of the couples on that show, he could identify with them. And it's because their behavior and what they liked, they didn't like, was very similar to what he liked and he didn't like. Now, those things are things that happen because of what we watch on TV, or in our case now, what we see online and whatnot. But here's the thing. Rarely do I find a person that is a perfect Generation X or a perfect millennial or a perfect whatever. I believe one of you guys told me that Alpha is the new generation. I have always believed that all of these things that we create are to keep dividing people and not really finding common goals. And here's the interesting thing about this. You know how we're always taught that we're all different and blah, blah, blah. But at the same time, we all want to belong to something. I think that's why people create all these stupid names like generations, and they try to put us in little boxes neatly wrapped and completely make sure that they know everything about us, when the reality is that there's nothing further from the truth. For example, all women have the. If you've ever heard of the book Mars versus Venus, it assumes that all men are one way and all women are the other way, and that's why we don't communicate well. Well, here's the thing: there are certain things about Mars versus Venus that are true. Men from jump, at least the generations before, like the older generations, were very competitive. Everything was about being the man of the house and whatnot. And the women were supposed to be the Susie homemaker and the one that understands and the one that likes to pat people in the back and show them love and caring and whatever. I've met couples that are the exact opposite. The man is the nurturer and the wife is the go-getter that wants everything is a competition and whatnot. You can't just divide people in categories and think that you got them nailed. Now, I understand, because my field of study is marketing, that it is easier to create campaigns like advertising campaigns, promotions, whatever, when you define a market. For example, 50-year-old women who do this or play this sport or whatever, or 30-year-old men who like to go to bars on Fridays to watch the ball game or whatever. Bottom line is, I understand how the logic works. The problem is that it doesn't take into account that not everybody's going to behave the way you want it. That's why you see so many movies fail, so many products fail, so many stores fail. Because they're assuming that everybody's going to act the same way. Much like generations. I can tell you that I'm a Generation X baby. And I was never a latchkey kid. Why? Because my mother was a stay-at-home mom, which was a luxury back in those days. And because she was a stay-at-home mom, I never had to do anything by myself. In fact, it goes even further, because my mom never learned how to drive. But that poor woman would actually take the bus with us, because we had to take several buses and whatnot. We lived about an hour away from school. And she would take the bus with us in the morning, run around downtown San Juan or wherever all day, and then come back at 1:30 to make sure that at 2 p.m. when we got out of school, she could walk with us to the bus station to go and get the next bus to go back home. It was a sacrifice that she was willing to make when my dad traveled, because my parents were helicopter parents, not gonna lie, but also because she felt like she was being helpful, I guess. And I'm not going to lie to you, some of the funniest things that happened to us and some of the best times we had was with my mom getting in the bus with us, because it was, okay, in the morning it was horrible because we were all asleep. But in the afternoon when we were coming home, of course, you talk to your parents about what you're doing and whatnot. And we always had a good time. So I loved it. Having said that, most people in my generation would walk home by themselves, something that now would be probably illegal. They would go home by themselves, would open their own doors and stay in the house, locked in the house, until their mom or their dad got home. I didn't have that experience, but I'm a Generation X. There are a lot of things that people when they do videos about Generation X, I really cannot relate to them, because that was not my experience. And I know for a fact that I'm not alone. Yet again, I consider myself a true and through Generation Xer. So what is the solution then for these people? I have no idea because I don't care. But what I can tell you is this. And the reason why I'm bringing it up is because I'm tired of the okay boomer saying. Not everybody that you call a boomer is a boomer. Just because they're older than you doesn't make them a boomer. Number one. Number two, just because people are conservative and, let's say, Republican, doesn't necessarily mean they're boomers. I know a lot of baby boomers that are not Republican or conservative for that matter. And number three, stop trying to put people in boxes. We all like what we like and we don't like what we don't like. And some of us like to grow old gracefully and some of us will fight it tooth and nail until we're done. I hope you like this video. I hope you tell me everything about your favorite Christmas movie. And thank you so much for watching. Thank you to my patrons. Have a wonderful day. Bye.